righty, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Appreciate everyone taking time today to allow MCF to kind of present this webinar on really around IT governance and compliance, but really around QuickBase ecosystem management tools as a whole. So we do have some more people coming on into the webinar as we speak. We will continue right now, and we'll let them kind of funnel on in as we progress. So do appreciate everyone taking time out of the day, and I just want to go over a few logistics before we actually jump into the webinar, just to kind of go all the way through. So we do encourage participation. Right now, as we see, everybody is on mute. I ask you to kind of leverage the chat functionality. We do have people looking at the chat, and we'll kind of speak through any questions you have there. If we ultimately need to unmute you, we can do that as well and kind of go through. But we'll also be giving at the end of the webinar guidance on how to reach MCF to kind of talk to us after the webinar if you like, and we can have a more personal one-on-one discussion around a lot of the solutions and services that you will see today. So in terms of keeping yourselves on mute, I think that control is up to me, and we'll continue the webinar as is. But please use the chat functionality, and let's make this as engaging as possible as we continue. So today's webinar, as I mentioned earlier, I think this is a series of webinars that we'll be holding monthly. So this is kind of kicking us off around IT governance and compliance. So the speaker of today, in addition to myself, Robert Salaj, is going to be Hersch. He's our Director of Engineering. And he's really going to be the one demoing and showcasing a lot of the tools and solutions that we've been discussing up to this point. So you guys can see a quick little agenda of that. I think just for the mixture of the audience that's on the call today, we're going to give a very, very brief MCF introduction, just kind of sharing a little bit about who we are and kind of some of the new branding and websites that we offer. But we're definitely going to be jumping right into the meat of the webinar to cover really kind of what you guys have come here to see. So we're going to talk first and foremost around the compliance challenges around governance. And then in addition, kind of what you can do today. What are some of the solutions and services that you can kind of do right now yourself within native QuickBase and kind of manage through any of the issues that you guys see. We're going to move into what's called the Enterprise Management Solutions, or MX. It's really kind of our framework. As we've seen and witnessed a lot of clients today who've really embraced QuickBase as a technology, the journey that they go on and kind of how that morphs within an environment. Now, we see a lot of success right away, and we begin to see how that begins to compel and bring about new challenges that we just have to find solutions to. So we're going to dive into that, hopefully have a good discussion, and continue along the way. So, and then obviously we're going to be demoing a lot of the MCF schema, performance analyzer, and advanced logging solution that's in relation to this. So please ask questions as we continue, and we'll jump right into it. Real quick, just to kind of some brief stats for those that have done business with MCF before and for those that may not know. We've actually been in business since 2007. We're actually one of the largest QSPs out there. We do have about 70 plus members. And a lot of those members span the globe, a lot of times dealing with enterprise clients who begin to kind of take us across oceans looking for support with their QuickBase applications. We want to begin to offer that support as far as we can. So we do have about 70 plus team members. I think we also have about 15 to 18 actual QuickBase certified developers on staff, and that number continues to grow. So a lot of experience, a lot of core competencies that we've been able to grow and really begin to extend the platform that you're going to see in the next slide or two. So a lot of projects, a lot of partners to kind of be the turnkey solution provider that you're looking for, whether or not that's extending the platform by integrating into SharePoint or BI tools or Esri technology. We can be that one-stop shop for what you guys are looking for. So. And no, we don't have any actual owls who work for us, but if you do know of any looking for a job, we will certainly look at their resume as well. All right, so last slide on who MCF is. I think when we take a look at our solution offerings and kind of what makes up our business, it really falls around 4 core competencies. So first and foremost, there's a lot of QSPs in the environment and in the market. Obviously, we certainly offer the development and support of a QuickBase application, but it also goes a little bit further beyond. We have some members on staff with Lean Six Sigma backgrounds and can offer business process consultation. So if you're looking for just some upfront discovery work, a Kaizen event perhaps, kind of going in and looking at how that technology can be used to the best of what you're looking to accomplish within your business, we can offer this support as well and give you a detailed roadmap. We offer a lot of integration services. A lot of times by using QuickBase as a platform, the next obvious evolution of the tool is how do we integrate, whether that be with legacy systems or with current systems such as Oracle and SAP, and we can offer those services as well. And last but not least, the next two there is really around our extended services and our partner services. We have about 20 plus solutions and services, 2 to 3 of which that you're going to be seeing today. But I also encourage everyone here to take a look at our website, MCFTech.com, and really look at our product add-ons and extensions and begin to kind of see how much more we have to offer, whether that be Gantt schedulers, template builders, backup tools, etc. So with that, as a little bit of a backdrop, hopefully that gives a little bit understanding and kind of where we're at today. So we have seen a lot, and we definitely want to offer a little bit of perspective as it relates to IT governance and compliance. So to kind of transition us, I'll kind of hand this over to Harrison, who will speak to really what are some of the challenges we see today and kind of what you can accomplish yourself.
So QuickBase is, a great platform, right? It's rapid application development. You get a great amount of flexibility natively in the tool. And sometimes the fact that people are able to move so fast can kind of highlight some risks, right? So some of those challenges that we've highlighted up at the top are security, lack of visibility, and change control. There's sort of others that can kind of fall in between all of these. But if we look at the top one, security, we know in a lot of larger organizations that there's IT governance policies and procedures. And security is obviously really important. We all read the headlines. We know what's going on. And a lot of people store really sensitive information inside of QuickBase. And QuickBase as a platform is secure, has really granular permissions. The platform, the technology itself, QuickBase goes through regular audits, all of those types of things. Sometimes what can happen with security is when you have citizen development that might not be fully sort of trained on security practices and managing roles and whatnot, they kind of start letting roles kind of be too expansive. They might invite extra people in as administrators. And that kind of ties into the second one, right? If you don't have the visibility of what's going on in that application, if IT doesn't have access or there are no tools to say, hey, how come John and Sally are administrators in this application? Or doing regular audits to review roles and not just looking at the individual role to say, well, yeah, I can see that John is a project manager in the application, but what can a project manager really do, right? So that lack of visibility that can sometimes happen with citizen development is one of the other things that we'd want to tackle. And that could also be just sort of applications kind of growing really quickly, not kind of fully understanding where the data is. Do I have the data? Do I have a certain data set in the same place, right? Is it being managed in two different places? Different types of things like that. And then that kind of ties right into the change control, right? So as people are, again, doing rapid development in the application, maybe they're adding fields, adding reports, that's great. They're getting real-time benefit out of the tool, but they're also, might be adding tables, relationships. They could be adding entirely new applications. And it might be challenging sometimes to get buy-in from all the right participants, ensure that user adoption is all kind of really high. And we know that when IT projects fail, they don't generally fail because the technology is broken, right? They fail because of user adoption, training, and the organizational change management that comes along with that. So really managing change to sort of understand what that impact is doesn't mean that you have to go through a really long process if that's not something that's suitable for the business, but just sort of having some change control around those things is really important. So if we look at some of the things that you can do natively in QuickBase today to address some of the things that we know occur up top, first thing sounds really simple, but it's really important to start at the bottom with roles. So what that means is if you're creating a new role, wherever possible, don't copy the administrator role and then pare down permissions because it's really easy to miss something. So starting at the bottom with a role that has no access, again, this is a good practice in any system, not just QuickBase, but starting with no access and working your way up. And that might involve a little bit more testing, right? You might need to kind of go back and tweak a few things. You found out that, maybe someone needed to add a record to a table that you didn't think of. But by doing that, aside from maximizing your security, you're also actually familiarizing yourself with that application in depth even more, and sort of, ensuring that you can support it long term. Some other things, right? We might want to build an application management app. So this is something that we do for a lot of our enterprise clients. And what that means is the application can manage releases, which natively in QuickBase, QuickBase doesn't have a concept of a release or a version inside of an application that you build. But that doesn't mean that we can't make one, right? We can't, we can sort of say, hey, we're going to go make these 10 changes to the application, and we're going to, we're going to kind of bundle those into a release. Now, there might be some challenges on how you actually handle that release, which we do have some practices for, whether you use the QuickBase sandbox or whether you build it in a development environment and then copy it in production, or whether you do it in the production application and just try and minimize the risk. And the goal with this is not to impede development, right? IT's job should not be to stop people from growing. We want to facilitate the growth, but we want to do it in a really safe and secure way. Without letting things get out of hand. So that's what a lot of these things do. And again, building an application management app doesn't mean that you have to say, hey, we're going to take these changes and we're not going to roll them out for 6 months. That's not the goal. The goal would just be to kind of capture some documentation and some changes, potentially ensure that people are aware of the changes. Maybe you have 2 people approve them before they go live, things like that. Measure forecasting table growth using summary reports. So this is really kind of a really small thing that you can do. QuickBase has table limits on each table. They've grown by about 9 times in the past couple of years, which is great. The current limit is 500 megs per table. That's a hard limit. Sometimes getting into the 100, 200 meg range, you can start to see some performance challenges if the application's not managed really well. But what we want to do, and what can be a really big help, is sort of planning the application. So if we look at, I have a project and a task table, and I look at how many tasks are being added each month in a summary report just by pivoting on that date created field. I can look at how many are being added. I can take the table size, get a rough idea of how much each record is taking up. And then we can look at company growth. And again, now we're tying IT into the business. So we can say, well, we're averaging 5,000 records per month. We know that takes up 3 megs of space additional every month. And the business is forecasting to grow 10%. So we can figure out our growth from there, and we can look at, hey, how is QuickBase going to scale with us? Do we need to look at an archiving strategy? Do we need to look at kind of keeping performance in line, those types of things? So again, never impeding the development, just trying to get a little bit of a forecast and some foresight in there. One of the things that we see that comes up a lot with QuickBase is logging, and we're going to show you a really great tool for that today. But if you want to do something natively, what you can do is create an email box, just kind of logs at Acme, or QuickBase logs at Acme Corp, and you can set QuickBase to send you an add, delete, or modify notification and send a copy of the form. And you can kind of just have that all sent to a generic inbox. Not something you have to look at regularly, but in that case, you'd only be limited by whatever your email inbox size is. We've had clients that are able to go back in there and type in a record ID if you have a good search mechanism and kind of find what's going on. It's not going to give you any reporting or anything like that, but if you're looking for a really quick way to get some history, that's a way to do it. QuickBase has something called the Realm reporting tool. It's available on the platform plan and above. It's a tool that you can get by engaging with the customer support team. They give you basically a QuickBase application where you can get some billing reports, look at users, things like that. So it's information that's available via the API, and they're actually aggregating that into an application for you. So if you don't take advantage of that today and you're on one of those plans that supports it, definitely reach out to that customer care team because it can be a big help for you. And then last but not least that we have on the list is the QuickBase Performance Analyzer. This is relatively new, and what it does is it lets you scope out a specific action and say, hey, I'm looking at this table dashboard. and I'm trying to understand why it takes 3 seconds to load. And what you can do is run the performance analyzer and get sort of an idea of what's causing that, and also in some cases some suggestions on how to resolve the issue or make an improvement, assuming that you can based on the business needs, right? It might, QuickBase might say, hey, there's too many columns on this report, consider reducing them, but you might need those columns. And so we might want to look at some other strategies there to resolve that. But again, the performance analyzer, relatively new. I'm going to quickly show it today just so that everyone's familiar with it, but it is a really great tool.
Okay. So we know that was a lot. Hopefully that's beginning to preface kind of some of the heart that we're going to begin jumping into today. So hopefully you guys have seen some of those instances really take shape within your own ecosystems as well. Just to allow here some time to get ready, we are going to move into the demo here next. Just want to go over one or two more slides. For those that have jumped in halfway into the webinar, please use the chat functionality to ask any questions as we proceed. And we'll certainly take time to answer and make sure that we cover all questions you may have. Or you can certainly feel free to reach out to us afterwards too. So one last story here. Hopefully we can kind of all relate to this. It's kind of personal to me, but just kind of the what we see as a QuickBase journey and how this leads into IT governance. As Harrison was saying, I think one of the jobs is to really enable the workforce here to embrace technology, but also do it in a safe and secure fashion. And the beauty of QuickBase is really the ability to develop those rapid applications and allow the citizen developers to take hold of that. In my personal experience, I've seen systems and environments go from 1 to 2 applications to 100 overnight. And that can be very good. There's a lot of power and benefit. Obviously, it's a collaboration tool in the cloud, and it brings its own value. I think we all understand that. But at the same token, as these applications grow and the journey proceeds, in which we're trying to get more and more value out of it, kind of the step 3 here, we begin to see a lot more business-critical information in the system. And a lot of times when that happens, a lot of red flags begin to come up sometimes of a lot of personnel trying to understand what's the data going into it, who has access, what's the visibility, what are people doing in these applications. And so we really need to make sure that we can offer solutions to kind of help answer those questions. So that leads us into the enterprise management really framework that we're going to be talking about and go over some of the tools. When we see this framework, and this is kind of good for everybody, and I think we all understand this, but can see a pictorial of it, it really revolves around allowing the system to be scalable, but at the same time allowing it to have some control and governance around it. So a lot of times that may include things such as reporting, additional UI enhancements, and or integration. So when we look at these 5 components, there's a lot behind the scenes. We're only going to touch a little bit of the tip of the iceberg. But if you ever want to consult on this or begin to kind of see if you have an environment with a lot of applications and really want to have a lot of in-depth conversation, we have offered consultation services around just this. And I don't even want to call it a theory, but just around this framework of how we can help our clients. So do take advantage, ask questions, and let's see how we can help you today. So Harrison, hopefully that gives you enough time to get prepared, and I'd say
I'm all set.
Let's jump into it.
Cool. I'm going to share my screen. You guys should see a demo application. Let me know when you do.
Yes, perfect.
Cool. Great. So first thing that we wanted to talk about is logging today. So as we talked about a couple slides ago, QuickBase doesn't natively offer a way to sort of tell you what who's looked at what record. You get obviously date modified, last modified by a record owner, those types of things. And we know that we can do some things with email notifications, like I just said, and there's even some great solutions out there that can parse those email notifications and write them to a log table. And that's great because it tells you who did a specific action, right? That's the key behind a QuickBase email notification. It's got to be an action, an add, a modify, or a delete. But it doesn't necessarily tell us our views, so who viewed a record, who edited a record, those types of things, who viewed the edit form, right? It doesn't tell us who modified a report, who ran a report, or we can start to get into the administrative layer, so modifying the schema. Who was looking at field properties, who was looking at dashboard properties, all of these types of things. And this is really important for a couple reasons. as you start to grow QuickBase, you might have multiple people in an application as a developer or an administrator. And it's really important to be able to understand what happened there so that you can correct any issues. Not necessarily to be able to pass blame or anything like that, but if you do have 2 or 3 people working in an application, then you want to sort of backtrack a little bit and say, hey, hang on, we had a little bit of an issue this morning. What happened? And then maybe you learn that, John and Bill kind of conflicted on something, and then you can kind of backtrack. So what we have is an advanced logging solution. And this is our demo application, just a fairly simple app that has some enhancements in it and some native QuickBase. And what I'm quickly going to do is just go browse around. So I've gone to my clients table. I'm going to edit a record. Maybe I click on settings, and I go to fields. And I click on a formula field that we have for our QuickBooks integrations. And now what I'm going to do is go to our log application. And you'll see on this dashboard we get some really cool statistics. So just some usage information, monthly usage by user, usage action over the past couple of weeks. And you can see users here, and on the right you can see actions. And then down below we have things grouped by the individual table. So if I click on our actual log entries, what I can actually see is if we look here, here is my dashboard action. So when this webinar started, I pulled up that demo app dashboard. Right above, you can see that I went to the clients table. So I went to the clients, and that TD means table dashboard. So for those of you that don't know, QuickBase URL schemes are that A that's in there is the action that you're doing. So we have TD, and then we have ER, which is edit record. And on the parameters, you see we actually have the record that the user was looking at. We can then see that I went to the table settings home, and then I listed fields, and then I went and I actually looked at the properties of field ID 69. So we have a really good way to kind of backtrack what's going on here. And that gives us auditing, right? It gives us accountability. It gives us some statistics like I was showing you on the homepage here. So really even understanding how is the application being used, right? You've just invested time and money into a QuickBase application or multiple QuickBase applications. It'd be really good to understand where are people spending their time, right? And that could help you drive future investments. So if you learn that people really aren't going and using a certain table, that can open the door to a conversation and again, get some more ROI out of QuickBase because maybe there were some issues with it. Maybe people said, hey, I really didn't like I really didn't like the functionality that was there. And that really circles back to those user adoption things that we talked about earlier. So by having this information, you can sort of better gear your development efforts. And you can also, when someone says, hey, I experienced an issue, you also get some history here, right? I can go in here and say, okay, well, I heard that you had an issue. We can type a name in, and now we're just using QuickBase reporting, right? So we can quickly look at kind of what happened, and we can breadcrumb what you did. So the basic version of the tool will give us sort of page views, right? So this tells me, hey, I looked at the modify fields for the modify field action for field ID 69, but I didn't actually, it doesn't tell me here that I made a change. And so we do actually have some other support where we can actually log individual field edits. So if you were on a page, we can store the history of what was individually modified. So we can store that someone hit the print or email button. So for example, if I hit more in print, we can capture that. So again, from a compliance standpoint, maybe you have healthcare information, different types of things like that. Again, we're able to capture that information and let you report on it really well. So those are some of the more advanced things that we can do from a logging standpoint. Again, you'll see that this was all really quick, really easy. I didn't have to do anything special. It's completely transparent to the user, and it doesn't impact performance anyway. So that's kind of the first thing. That gives us the kind of face value of what's happening. Now, if we tie that to some of those things that you guys get natively in QuickBase, right, we have this performance analyzer. So what you can do, of course, is hit Analyze Performance, and you can load your dashboard. And you can go back. Oh, there's no details on the homepage. Sorry. So I can go to a table homepage and get performance details, and I can actually see what took up the time. And so by doing that, we get really good information. But like I mentioned, you might not know what page to go look at, right? How do you know unless someone tells you every time I click on this button, that specific action is an issue? So by combining that with some of these tools, we can now say, you know what, I'm going to go look at these statistics, so I can look by the actions, right, or by the table, and I can then pivot on the information and say, let's look at how many actions did the table dashboard have on the projects table. And if that's a lot of actions, then I can kind of take that a step further and look if I can kind of squeeze out some more performance. So what you have to remember is that QuickBase is a single-threaded platform. It means it only processes one thing at a time, and it does it in sequence. That isn't really that big of an issue when you're talking about milliseconds, right? So even in really high volume applications, QuickBase performs really well. So, but if you had an issue, let's say you had a homepage that was taking a second to load and it was loaded 600 times a day, that's potentially 600 seconds of load time that's scattered throughout the day. And because QuickBase is single-threaded, things could be queued in line. So if you are able to take that 1 second load time and drop that down to a half a second or 3/4 of a second, you're able to, over the aggregate, get some better performance over the application. And this would also then help you find, outliers. So is there really a page that's just taking 5 or 6 seconds to load? And let's go see what we can do about that. So from an app architecture standpoint, that's something that we put a lot of time into. Just when we architect applications. Even we don't necessarily have all the foresight to understand, a year in advance how everyone's going to use an app. So that's why we want to deploy some of these advanced tools and kind of go from there. So that's kind of the basic functionality from a logging standpoint. And what we've recently done, I'm going to quickly switch to, hang on 1 second. So a couple further things that we've only recently started deploying. Let me actually switch the screenshot. So again, one of the things that we don't get natively from QuickBase is performance analytics as an aggregation or statistics and things like that. So this is actually brand new. We've done a lot of R&D on this and been able to get this working. This is really cool. What we're actually able to do is combine this with our existing logging tools, deployed in an application, and then get really great performance analytics. So just to kind of clarify, that first part that I was showing you is kind of really good for auditing, compliance, trends, those sort of things. And then this is really the performance and the troubleshooting side of the house. So first thing we're going to see at the top is how much the client processing time was and what the page load on the network was. So again, right out the gate, if someone said, "Hey, I'm having trouble with with a page not loading well," or maybe you're just analyzing analytics over the past 2 weeks, you're able to see exactly where the breakout of that time was. And if we look at the top, we get the client processing time and the page load. At the bottom, we have the receiving and the send request time, which is, so if something took a total of 5 seconds to load, we're actually showing why it took 5 seconds to load and how that breakout occurs. We also get page views, and then we get session information. So whenever you're signed into QuickBase, you have a session. Well, we can actually follow a session and thread it all of the way through to see what you're doing in QuickBase. So if you did have a user who was experiencing trouble or a subset of users that said that there were performance issues, we can actually follow their session rather than just looking at it as a page load in isolation, for example. If we go to one of these other screenshots, you'll see that we also get browser version, operating system, and even screen resolution. So when we start deploying these types of tools in custom enhancements, so we do a lot of custom user interfaces inside of QuickBase, outside of QuickBase, we're taking this information and we're enabling the administrators behind the scenes to get a whole new view on their QuickBase information and what's going on. So you can see at the top, we've got some high resolution, that's on a surface, right, that we have that higher resolution. So if you did have issues on a website that was connecting to QuickBase, this information isn't exclusive to QuickBase. We can deploy it in all of the enhancements that we write. Again, we're able to do some really good troubleshooting there to kind of understand what's going on, as well as understand, again, what's our user base. So we recently had this, this was deployed for a client, and we recently learned that over half of the traffic to the custom enhancement that we had built for them was happening from Android devices. And we actually knew that it was Android 4.4, 5.0, and 5.1 just from these tools. So that, again, lets us circle this all back together, right? How is IT enabling the business without, while still protecting the business? So IT is now able to go back and say, hey, it looks like we have, more than half the traffic is occurring from mobile devices. We didn't know that until we looked at these tools. And so that lets us then go back and then optimize the solution for mobile so that we're tailoring to those users and we're taking their experience even further. And that's how we really ensure user adoption and make sure that these projects are successful. So a couple more screenshots on this. Okay, so you'll see we actually even get the page load time down to the DB ID. So the DB ID in QuickBase is the database ID. So this is load time, standard deviation per individual table. And then what's really cool is we'll also actually get console errors that are in the browser. So things that are executing client-side in JavaScript, whether that's QuickBase or an enhancement, we actually do get those errors back as well, so that you don't have to go through the process of remoting into someone's computer, looking at their browser, understanding what's going on. That's always great, and there might be a valuable time for that, but this gets us that information. And again, we had this deployed for a client just recently, and we learned that there were a series of errors on some pages that we needed to go solve, and this helped us do that really quickly. So again, just to kind of recap, logging solution, these tie together really well. They're kind of like sister solutions from our standpoint, and they enable you to track sort of user activity, analytics, understand what's going on, as well as performance, usage, what type of device is it on, things like that. Okay. If there's any questions, feel free to chat them. We're going to hop into the schema tool. Let me know when you guys are back to seeing QuickBase. You should see the chart on the right. Rob, do you see it?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Great.
Yeah, and just as Harrison said, if there is any questions, feel free to use the chat. Hopefully this is kind of piquing the interest around some of the performance in analyzers and how we're kind of taking a look at the entire system. So if anything, if you guys want us to slow down or ask any questions, please feel free to use the chat, and we'll make sure to answer.
Thanks. So the next kind of thing is the schema tool. And the schema tool fills a need in QuickBase, which is, hey, I've got all these QuickBase applications. How do I know what's going on with them? So first thing we talked about that you can get plan dependent is the realm reporting tool. And that's pretty good. It gets you user information. I think it gives you some sort of like billing breakouts so that you can do some accounting and understand what department is using things when. And we really wanted to take that to a whole new level. And this tool was actually born out of the need to track changes a couple of years ago in applications that we were building internally. So we started saying, hey, it would be really cool if we had a history of formulas when we're working on formulas. Then it kind of expanded to, well, you know what, it would be really good if I had a history of fields and when those fields were added and those types of things. So over the course of a few years, we've built a really robust tool. Some of these things that we actually do are not only not available natively in QuickBase, we're actually using some special techniques where this data isn't even available via the API. So we're actually using some really special things to kind of get that information. So the schema tool is generally a private deployment. You board your applications, and what I'm showing here is the demo application. So this is the application we were just looking at. And I'm going to kind of run through top to bottom what everything is here. There's a lot of information, so I'm going to try and I'll go slow. If anyone has any questions, like Rob said, feel free to stop us. But the individual fields aren't as important as the content that I'm going to go over, just at a really high level. And then we can always dive in if anyone has any specific questions. So, and we have a series of buttons up at the top. The primary ones are get or update schema, which goes and gets fields, tables, roles, and users. And we apply a lot of analytics to that to get the history. So if you had 100 fields in a table and you ran the solution on Monday, and you deleted a field on Tuesday and you ran the solution again, we're not going to delete the field from the schema tool. We're going to mark it as deleted so that you always have that information. And just to show you, we have the tables here. We get back the alias, the table ID. You can see some QuickBase summary fields. Okay, so we're summarizing all of the fields that are in the table. And if I open this, you'll see here are the fields that are on the improvements table. Again, we're combining this with the power of QuickBase for kind of reporting and summary fields and all of those types of things. Directly to the right of number of fields is what we call a red flag field. So we've taken our years and, like Rob mentioned, all the successful projects that we've had, and we said, hey, what do we know can potentially cause an issue in a field? And we've put some content in there. Nothing crazy, but it's a red flag. We're not saying there's something wrong with it. We're just saying, hey, this might be an area where you want to take a look at something. So that's kind of the getter update schema. You'll see again down here we get roles and users. So same type of concept as tables and fields. We get all of your roles, the access level, how many users are in there, table role settings, which is a concept I'm going to get to in a second. And then you'll see we get the individual user. You'll see here it says current role, and that's because we store the historical role as well. And then you'll see we track if the user has been removed from the application so that you always get that history. The next thing is run size stats. So again, we talked about forecasting size a little bit earlier. QuickBase gives you the table size. What there's no way to know, though, is how much is each field using from a consumption standpoint. So again, we're taking that to a next level. QuickBase offers a great feature in tracking that information, and we're going a step deeper. So this enables you to do two things. One, if you do want to look at an archive strategy or just sort of understand how the application's being used, we're able to dive in and say, hey, we can see that that a specific field is consuming a certain amount of space, and you'll see that field shows up here on the right. If it's blank, it's because that specific type is not a data entry field. Only data entry fields where there's actually content stored is what's counted against that storage. The other thing this lets you do is isolate fields that are not being used. So again, we talked about keeping the applications really kind of clean and managing those applications. Well, by looking at fields that are not being used, we can either delete the fields, again, keeping the application clean, or we can look at finding ways to leverage those fields. The next thing we have is audit page usage. And what that does, I'm going to scroll all the way down, you'll see we actually get all of the pages that are in our application. So we have 129 code pages in our demo app. We store the content. So again, we have the revision. And then we store, we try and find the table page usages and the field page usages. Because everyone writes code differently, this is a little bit harder to be 100% accurate, but we do try and search for those things and then report on them here so that you can say, well, I know that our advanced scheduler uses 3 tables, and then I could go click on those tables to look at exactly what they are. So I can tell you here, tasks, departments, and resources are involved in our scheduler, and you can actually see the snippet of the code where we found the DB-ID. Audit permissions, this is a really important one. Coming back to security, you'll see down here we have table role settings. So what we actually do is we track the view, modify, add, delete, edit field properties, as well as if there's a custom permission. So if you want to say, users can only view records where they're active on a project team, we will actually store that. And again, we store the history of this. So our custom code is going out and applying logic to determine whether or not we need to make a change in the application, in our application, that we're storing the information so that you always get the history. And what you're then able to do is generate a really nice, clean output. So if you're used to looking at QuickBase content with roles and permissions, you know that the content is really great, but you kind of have to do that page by page, right? You either have to go role by role or table by table. And so what we've done is made a really clean, interactive page where you can view that information. You'll see we get custom permissions down here with a really nice, friendly highlighting feature to show you where it's being used. And then, of course, you can quickly toggle this into a printable version where we handle the pagination and kind of formatting it so that you could kind of post this up somewhere if you needed it. But again, really quick, easy to use tells you what's going on in the application. Again, nothing here reinventing the wheel. What we're trying to just do is present information in a really clean and easy-to-use way that you might not see it otherwise in QuickBase, so that you can make more informed decisions. We also have the ability to board users and board permissions. If you've ever copied a QuickBase application to work in a development app, or if you're migrating to a new application, sometimes that process of adding users can be a little bit tedious. So what we've done is we've enabled you to do a quick import there. And then board permissions is a really cool feature. Just for the sake of time, not going to go through a full demo of that. But what it does is it lets you interact with an Excel, like an Excel spreadsheet user interface, and we load all of the tables going across the top and all the rows going down on a column on the left, and you can actually type in there VM for view modify, and you can hit board permissions, and we'll actually go configure those behind the scenes for you so that you don't have to go do it page by page. So again, just another area where we're trying to really streamline things. And then we have we've done a small we have a small tool that works with Lucidchart. So we love Lucidchart for flowcharts, mockups, all of those types of things. What we do here is we actually generate, you'll see here we have a little dancing penguin for our loading icon, and we get this, this schema. And what we're actually able to do is go into Lucidchart and import the schema. And what you guys are familiar with is that QuickBase recently released entity relationship diagrams in the application. They're okay. If you have a small application, they work really well. As you start to get into bigger applications, it's a little bit more difficult to use, just to kind of keep it clean. And it's also not true unified modeling language. So what we've done here is it's what we call an assisted ERD. So we're not generating the whole thing for you, because there's really no way that we could code one of these to look clean, right? We want it to look presentable. And so that's why we call it an assisted ERD. And so you'll see we can actually drag things on here. And if I find something that has a relationship, you'll see we got the line, and it's a standard UML with the crow's feet. And then we have the primary key and the foreign key, and we show that link. So you can actually see primary key record ID goes into foreign key related build. And if we combine this with concepts of layers in Lucidchart, we're able to keep the entity relationship diagram really clean. And we can make a layer, for example, called accounting. And we can move things to that layer, right? So I can say move to the accounting layer. And now if I uncheck accounting, that disappears, right? So the concept being is that you have an application that's potentially large. We have applications that get up to 150 tables and have 6,000 fields, right? So when you get to these large applications, the native ERD tool is not going to work so well, not from a technical standpoint, but just it's not going to be very clean and easy to use. And if you're also looking for something a little bit more traditional, this is standard UML. So again, as you drag things on, you'll see we get the relationships, and you'll see in this case, we actually have two relationships. And as I continue to drag on, you'll see all of these things get connected. So again, if I were to kind of clean this up a little bit, move it to its own layer, you can wind up with a decent-sized ERD or entity relationship diagram that's clean and easy to review. So this is really good. Again, like everything we do, we also store the history. So you'll see we have a current ERD spreadsheet, and we're just using QuickBase QuickBase file history here so that we can store the revisions. And you always know what your ERD looked like at any given time. So again, to bring this full circle, by having multiple applications in here, so we actually in our own instance have a couple hundred applications so that we can track the usage. Again, we're tracking things like field types, formula revisions, so you always have the history, file size, field size, great amount of information. The way that it's presented in here is meant to give you a lot of information, but it's meant to be consumed in a really easy way, which I know this is a lot of information, but when we deploy it and go through training, it all makes sense. And then the best thing is you can also pivot on this information over all of your applications. So now I can go back and say, well, you know what? I want to see where this person has access. And now if I go look at that user record in the application, I can see all of the applications that they have access to and what their respective role is. And so what you're doing is ultimately you're getting a really good ecosystem overview that would be very challenging to do natively inside of QuickBase. So again, the concept in all of this is not to hinder development. It's not what we want to do. We want to enable development in a safe and secure way while also meeting some governance needs that your IT departments or maybe regulatory areas might require. So that is the end of the things that I was going to show. If anyone has any questions, feel free to let us know.
Yeah. Thank you, Harrison. And as Harrison mentioned, opening it up for certainly Q&A. As we look at the advanced logging tool, we've seen a lot of help around compliance, specifically HIPAA. I think definitely tracking that and every single key and stroke and what we're looking for and how the user experience is going through. So definitely as you look at this framework and the suite of solution tools, working hand in hand, giving us kind of a cockpit version of options to kind of use from an IT governance standpoint, while like Harrison said, not inhibiting but enabling the workforce. So I think there's certainly some options, and even if we didn't see anything today that really hit home, I think there's a lot there that we can kind of work and build, whether that be a custom solution for yourself or if we need to kind of enhance anything that you've seen today. So I'll give it a minute here to kind of ask some questions and allow anybody, if you had anything that we didn't cover or we're hoping to cover, that we can certainly kind of show that. While you do that, just to kind of share, if you're looking for information or additional information, feel free to certainly kind of reach out. I'll have a slide here of just some contact information. Or really just to kind of look at our website, as we have a lot of the information. If you look at, we just launched a brand new website, and just clicking on through some of the tabs that you see here around technology and a lot of the add-ons and extensions that we offer. We've talked about advanced logging. We've also talked about really the MCF schema tool, which is in here, schema tool. And as Harrison mentioned, the performance analyzer will be up there shortly to kind of show how we can kind of use all of that together. So on each one of the pages, if you navigate to one of the sections, and I'll just pick on advanced logging as an example, we do have a brief overview of kind of what the tool is all about, understanding how the insights and realizing the benefits from it, as well as a downloadable PDF file to take with you back. So we know it's a lot of information. It's a topic here that really takes time to understand, to kind of get buy-in from the entire organization, and takes time to kind of deploy and get this working for your business. So, but we do appreciate you taking the time today. I'll just double check here real quickly. Harrison, I don't know if you can see if there's any questions in the chat that may have come up.
I do not see any right now.
Got it. All righty. Well, I do know we actually used up the entire time slot on that, so that was actually pretty good. So we do thank everybody for their time. Again, know it's a lot of information. Feel free to reach out either to myself or Jennifer Richardson, who's within business development here. And we can certainly set up either a subsequent, more personal interaction here to kind of demo this and talk through some of the things as it relates to your business. Otherwise, feel free to visit our website and continue to kind of peruse some of the information and tools that we have to offer. So, Harrison, thank you for taking the time, and thank you everyone on the line for taking the time out of your day to watch the webinar. And we look forward to hearing from you in the future.